Good morning. Hi, thanks so much for being here. Somebody want to give me just a little thumbs up or a wave or a chat message, something to say, yes, I can hear you? Chat message would be good. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and get started because our time is so limited and hopefully some folks will join in. It's a nice small group, so let's keep it informal. And if you want to jump in with a question or a comment, either unmute yourself or use the chat, and we'll make sure nobody leaves without a question answered. I see folks still joining, so I'll kind of ease into it. Let me introduce myself while folks are getting connected. My name's Frank LoMonte. I'm coming to you from the University of Florida, where I run a research center on the right of access to information, the Breckner Center. But my connection to ASPA goes way back before that, about a dozen years ago, when I took the job running the Student Press Law Center, splc.org, which is a great resource for you that everybody should have bookmarked and take advantage of. It is free legal help for people doing journalism at the high school and college level, both students and advisors. And you should not be bashful about using their free hotline or downloading the resources off of their website. Oftentimes you can answer your own legal questions, or they're happy to do so. And I should start off by saying thank you to everybody who's working in student journalism. I know that sometimes being a journalism student or teacher doesn't make you the very most popular person in school. Sometimes you're considered to be a pest by your own administrators or some of your own fellow teachers. But what you're doing is a really valuable service to the community, and it's a hugely valuable learning experience. I've been a lawyer for 21 years, but I use my journalism skill set every single day as a lawyer, and I'm so happy to have it. And what we're going to talk about today is a skill set that you'll carry with you into the profession, even if you never work in the newsroom a day in your life. Everybody needs to know a little bit about the law of gathering and publishing news, because if you find yourself working in social media or marketing or public relations, anything that involves using images or video or music, you're going to need to know a little bit about the law governing what you can and can't photograph, what you can and can't film, and what you can and can't use from the web. So let's get started. I'm going to show you a little bit from, there we go, of info about the law governing both where you can and can't film and or take photographs, and also what you can and can't use when you're borrowing material from the web that's not material that you created, but you want to incorporate it into your own publication or your own website. What are some of those legal boundaries governing what is legal and not legal to reuse? So, and by the way, I came up with this presentation just having answered hundreds and hundreds of questions from the Student Press Law Center legal hotline, and knowing the kind of legal problems that folks are running up against at all levels of journalism, from student all the way up to the most experienced professionals. And this is one of the biggies. This is a question that if you're a lawyer that advises journalists, you're going to get this question sooner or later. Hey, I showed up at a crime scene, or I showed up at a demonstration or a protest or a parade, and I was told by the police I can't take pictures there. And if I keep doing it, they're going to take my camera away, or they're going to require me to erase my video. Can they do that? And the answer is it depends. But generally speaking, there is no such thing as a right to be private in public. All right. Once you step out of your front door and you expose yourself to being seen by strangers, you have waived any expectation that what you are doing is private. So if you are a journalist and you come upon something that is newsworthy, is interesting to you, if it's taking place in a space that you can see from a public spot, you're walking down the sidewalk, you're walking down the street, you're in a public space and you see news happening, that is yours to photograph, to video record, and to publish. It is not an invasion of privacy, especially as long as your feet are planted in a place where it is legal for you to stand. Obviously, being a journalist is not a get out of jail free card to trespass or otherwise violate the law. You can't go barging into somebody's private home or hospital room or nursing home and just start snapping away. But as long as your feet are planted in a place where it's legal for you to be, then everything that you can see is yours to photograph and publish. People are understandably sometimes sensitive about how their photo is going to be used. And sometimes your ethical judgment might tell you that even if you have a great photograph, you might make the ethical decision not to use it. You know, this happens all the time with things like somebody comes upon a car accident and there's a medical emergency and somebody getting first aid, and it's an especially kind of gory, bloody photograph. You might take the photograph thinking you're witnessing news happening, but later you get back to the newsroom and you decide as a good ethical judgment, you know, do I really want to use this photograph of somebody covered in blood getting first aid by the side of the road? Maybe not, right? Your ethics might tell you I don't publish it, but legally speaking, that photograph of somebody getting medical treatment by the side of the road belongs to you, and there's no invasion of privacy or other legal problem with taking that photo. Oftentimes you will run up against people who are kind of aggressive about trying to shut down your videography or your photography, and they'll say something like, well, you're violating HIPAA, you're violating medical privacy by taking this. I've had that call quite a bit, just had it earlier this week from somebody who was trying to photograph a vaccination site, a place where people were administering the COVID vaccine, literally in a stadium parking lot, the kind of place that is the opposite of a private space, right? A place that's open to public foot traffic, a place that can be seen by passersby. And one of the people managing this site comes out waving their arms saying, how dare you photograph this private medical event? You're going to violate HIPAA. Well, HIPAA is a federal medical privacy law that governs healthcare professionals and health insurers, and only those two people, not journalists, not students. And so while it is true that your doctor or your health insurance company can't go giving out your private medical records, it has nothing whatsoever to do with photojournalism or videography. And so just know that if you come upon a news event, including one that involves healthcare or medicine in some way, and it's taking place in a public space, that is your news event to photograph and film as you see fit. Again, no right to violate laws that apply to everybody else, and always use your common sense and good judgment and your diplomacy in dealing with police, especially if you're at a chaotic scene like a riot or a protest, or since you're in Alabama, a national football championship celebration, which you seem to have every year there. You're covering something that's chaotic where there's a risk of violent interaction between people and police. Then use your common sense and good judgment, try to stay a safe distance away for your own safety. But again, all of that stuff is yours to photograph and cover as you see fit. Now, what happens when you get inside of a school? Do the rules change? Well, so you've got both a legal issue here and also an issue of kind of school policy. Legally speaking, if you were to take a photo or a video of somebody walking down the hallway, let's say, or otherwise in a public area of a school building, that is not regarded in the eyes of the law as a private space where getting that person's image in your camera or on your smartphone is an invasion of privacy, right? So you snap that photograph of an identifiable person walking down the hallway of a school. Can they go to court and get money damages from you for invading their privacy? Absolutely not, right? I mean, that is the kind of space where a person is at risk of being seen by a stranger. I kind of use a rule of thumb, like, any place where you might run into the repair person or the person that restocks the vending machines is not a private space, right? So again, clearly you wouldn't take your camera into a bathroom or a locker room kind of place where people might be changing their clothes, right? That's clearly a private space, but a space that's just open to generalized foot traffic, no invasion of privacy, legally speaking. But does that mean that you have an absolute legal right to start filming or photographing? Not necessarily, not necessarily. If there are school rules and regulations that say, don't be using your smartphone during school time, or don't be on social media during school time, as best as we can tell, and lots of law about social media is still kind of written on shifting sand here, right? We've only had social media around for about 12 or 15 years, so a lot of the court cases kind of haven't gelled yet. But the best we can tell, there's probably not a First Amendment right to demand to be able to use that smartphone or to use your Twitter account or use your Instagram account during school time. So as long as the rule is being applied in a kind of an even-handed way, right? It's not being applied only to journalists so that only journalists are forbidden from taking photos or using their smartphones or using their social media. If everybody in the school is subject to the same degree of regulation, then that's probably constitutional. So there's probably not a right to insist on. This, by the way, happens to be a photo that got a student into some brief disciplinary trouble in Georgia. You may have read about this. A student did, in fact, snap an image to show that contrary to the official policy of the school about masking and social distancing, that people were doing neither of those things dependably in her school. They were neither masking nor social distancing. And she took this as kind of a whistleblower and published it on social media. And for a brief period of time, the student was subject to disciplinary action. But once kind of the whistleblowing nature of what she was doing became public, the discipline was quickly overturned just from the sort of power of public pressure and public opinion. So that sometimes can be your friend as well. This is a really interesting ethical discussion that a lot of news organizations are having, and it's a good one to have inside your student newsroom too. Do we respect a request by people who are protesting or demonstrating who don't want their faces shown? There's the law, and there's kind of your newsroom policy and your own ethical judgment. And sometimes those two things point you in two different directions. The law gives you a lot of rights as a photojournalist or a videographer. You have a lot of latitude to take photos or video of people doing things in public spaces. But your ethics, your professional judgment might tell you, I won't use every single thing that I have a legal right to use. And this is where those two things are coming into tension a lot, is racial justice protests or immigrant rights protests. Sometimes people might feel like they're exposing themselves to some danger, right? Somebody goes to a rally or a protest and they expose themselves as being here as an undocumented person. And they say, you know, I'm comfortable telling this small group of people in front of me that I'm here without documentation, but I'm not super comfortable about having that on the web with my name and my face attached to it. Who knows what might happen? And that's where you have to make an ethical judgment about the newsworthiness of that event. Legally speaking, once somebody stands up in front of the crowd and gives their name and exposes themselves to being photographed, then there is no more privacy interest there. But this particular photograph was taken about 4 years ago in Louisiana, where there was a protest involving a police shooting. And this is such a powerful photo. I kind of like to show this one as an example of why it is such a hard request to honor when somebody asks, I don't want to be photographed, or I don't want my face to be shown. This photograph is on front pages all around America when it was taken for obvious reasons. It's such a powerful photograph. This woman is kind of with great tranquility on her face, with this face of calm and resolve, is facing down these heavily armed riot police. And you can imagine if the photographer had said, well, I'm going to protect this person's identity by putting a giant rectangle over their face so that they're not visible or identifiable anymore. It would have completely changed the photograph, right? It really actually would have changed the whole story, because the story is about how calm she was in the face of this obvious threat to her, this dangerous looking situation, volatile looking situation. She faced it down with such calm. If you put a giant rectangle over her face, you can't tell if she's screaming or crying or hollering, right? It's a different, and the National Press Photographers Association actually has sort of a code of ethics that says, as a photojournalist, you shouldn't be changing the story that you're covering, right? You shouldn't be altering your photos in such a way that it alters the story that you are covering. And I think arguably you could say, you know, the expression on her face is everything about this story. And so ethically, I'm not so sure that it would be a great ethical judgment call to say, I'm going to blank this expression out on her face. So you can see how challenging that is ethically. It's a great discussion to have in your newsroom, because there's no quote unquote right answer here. It's a very tough judgment call, and it's a very person to person and situation to situation call. I do want people to know about this, that while while many police officers are unaware that there are limits on their authority, you should know this if you're out photographing in a situation where you might come into interaction with police. There is a federal law called the Privacy Protection Act that says that no government official, and it applies to all government officials, not just police, but all government officials, are forbidden from searching or seizing the devices or the spaces that journalists use to do their work. It was meant to outlaw barging into a newsroom and searching a newsroom, but it applies equally to any place that a journalist stores their work. And so that could be your laptop, that could be your smartphone, that could be the trunk of your car, any place where the police know that they are searching a journalist, right? So you're at that news event, you're wearing a press pass, you're obviously engaged in photojournalism or videography, and the police, for some reason, take a disliking to you. They decide they don't like to be on in your images, and they say, give me that phone, give me that camera, I'm gonna erase the memory of it. They're violating federal law if they do that. And actually, people have taken this to court, and they have made police agencies pay substantial money damages for doing this. And this doesn't just apply to full-time salaried professional journalists. It applies to anybody who is engaged in journalistic activity. So that certainly could apply to somebody who's on the staff of a student news organization. And so, do be clear when you're interacting with police at a situation like a riot or a protest or a demonstration. Do be clear, go out front that you are there in a journalist capacity. Make sure that whoever's in charge of kind of managing crowd control there with the police knows that, hey, I'm not a protester here. I'm not part of the demonstration. I'm here to record it. I'm here to inform the public about it. And at that point, the Privacy Protection Act should protect your rights. Now, let's talk about, this is a great legal unknown. This is one of these brain teasers that as a media and First Amendment lawyer, we kind of have to work off of our best guesses here. Nobody has yet taken a quote unquote Zoom privacy case to court. This is all so new, right? We all had to switch over to the virtual world a little less than a year ago. And so nobody has yet, to my knowledge, even tried to bring this lawsuit. But is there any legal problem? Is there any legal problem with using something like a screenshot of a Zoom class? You will see people wanting to do this, right? I can imagine that in your newspapers or your yearbook, if you're trying to kind of chronicle what was going on in the year 2020, you can't chronicle what was going on in the year 2020 without showing a Zoom class, right? That was kind of the whole point of 2020, is we all had to switch to the virtual world. And so is there any privacy problem with using that screenshot, with using an image that is taken of people attending a Zoom class? And our best guess as lawyers is probably not. The US Department of Education, which is the enforcement agency over student privacy law, the US Department of Education has said, back in the pre-Zoom era, has said that there is no privacy problem with letting a visitor sit and watch a class, because FERPA privacy, the federal privacy law, only applies to the release of confidential records that are maintained in a school database of some kind, right? So your report card, your transcript, your SAT scores, your attendance records, the kind of things that would be kept on file in a superintendent's office or a principal's office, those things are considered private under federal law. But a screenshot of a Zoom class is none of those things, right? If you take it yourself as a student journalist, that's not part of any school maintained or district maintained record. That's on your hard drive or it's on your smartphone. And so it's not a school maintained record. And the Department of Ed has said that nothing about kind of the everyday activity that's going on inside of a class, somebody going up and writing on the blackboard or whatever, or the whiteboard, none of that is a private matter. Visitors are free to come and go and watch that. And so for that reason, there's probably not any legal prohibition against using that screenshot. But that may be a conversation where you've got to educate your own school administration and lawyers about it, because a lot of people are, understandably, they're uncertain about this brave new world of online learning, and they're very privacy phobic. And so they may say, don't you dare do that, don't you dare use or publish those screenshots. And so it's important to, kind of have that conversation and anticipate that you may run up against some, some privacy concerns. All right, let's spend the rest of our time kind of switching gears from privacy law to copyright law. This is a big recurring question that occurs not just in student newsrooms, but all student newsrooms. I'm putting together a spread for the newspaper or magazine, and the exact perfect photo is visible to me from a Google image search. Can I just drop and drag it from my Google search into my layout and call it a day? And the answer is, it's pretty dangerous to do that, and sometimes it's really dangerous to do that. Back in the old days, when I first started doing this work 10 or 12 years ago, I used to be able to tell high school journalists, look, copyright law is important to know, and someday you'll be out in the workplace and you'll need to know this in your workplace, but don't worry too much about it now. As a high school student, I used to be able to tell people that, but I can't tell people that anymore, because I have actually seen photojournalism organizations try to bring legal claims against high school publications for hundreds and hundreds of dollars for using photos without consent. And so they're playing for real money now. It is not at all uncommon. It is not at all far-fetched that if you do a Google image search and you pull that photograph that you find and you drop and drag it or screenshot it into your own layout, that you're going to wind up getting that $500 lawyer letter from a photojournalism agency saying you owe us hundreds of dollars in damages for copyright infringement because you used our photograph without consent. So start with the assumption that when you find something online, you're going to need consent to reuse it. And then think about, is it possible to find some workaround? It is possible to find some place where you can get images that are lawful for you to use. And I've given you the Wikimedia Commons logo here for a reason, because Wikimedia Commons, which is a part of Wikipedia, has made it their business to try to assemble as many photos as they can that are protected by what is called a Creative Commons license. Hopefully everybody here maybe by now has encountered this term, Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a way that a person who's the creator of content, a song, a video, a poem, a photo, whatever, a creator, can kind of give the whole world a blanket license to reuse their work if they credit it properly. And so with the Creative Commons image, you are free to republish it as long as you credit it properly. So read the fine print of the license that is attached to that image, but as long as you obey the terms of the license, then you can reuse that material lawfully. Do keep in mind, because I've had this conversation and it's kind of a horrifying one when somebody shows you a layout. I've had this happen before at high school publications and even in college from time to time. Somebody will show me a layout or a website they've done, and they'll have a photograph front and center in the middle of it that says something like courtesy of Associated Press or courtesy of Reuters. And I'll ask them, well, did you purchase the rights to this? And they'll say, well, no, but I put courtesy of, and that's just as good as purchasing it. And that is a slam on the brakes moment. It is absolutely not as good. Giving attribution is not the same thing as getting consent. Giving attribution is not the same thing as getting consent. You cannot just borrow a photograph that is for sale online, and all those Associated Press or Reuters photographs or photo sharing service photos, they are for sale. People charge money for those. So you cannot just take that, drop it into your publication or drop it onto your website, attribute it, credit it, and think that you are doing something lawful. You will get popped by those agencies because they do police the reuse of their content. So be very careful. Google is not the owner of those photos. Those photos come from some owner, and know who the owner is, and especially if it comes from something like Reuters or Associated Press or one of those iStock photo types stock services. Buy it, do not borrow it, because you will get a nasty lawyer letter. Social media, we should finish up by talking about this because people do want to reuse images they find on social media. And posting an image to social media is not a copyright waiver, right? When you upload an image to a platform like Instagram, what you are telling the public is you are welcome to view this on my Instagram feed, and you're welcome to do whatever Instagram lets you do with it. So if Instagram lets you reshare it inside of the Instagram app, then of course you're welcome to do that. But you're not welcome to take it and run with it and use it on your own website or your own blog or your own advertisement. That exceeds what the terms of Instagram and what copyright law allow you to do. Now, sometimes it is legal to make what is called a fair use of material. I'm making a fair use right now by showing you this Shay Mitchell screenshot of an Instagram account, because we are talking about that in an educational nonprofit context. I'm not making any money off of this, right? I'm doing this for educational purposes, and I get to do that. But social media is not your free photo sharing service. So if you need a photo of a famous person and you're not using it like this for a classroom presentation purpose, then think about some workaround. Ask for consent to use it. Go to an iStock photo type site and pay a couple of dollars for it, or try to find a Creative Commons licensed photo through something like Wikimedia Commons, and all those things will keep you on the right side of copyright law. It looks like our half hour has blown by. Does anybody have a super quick question or comment that they want to wrap up with? Otherwise, I'll probably need to let you all move on and go to your next event. All right, well, thank you so much for spending this time.